Well, it will take over a year to fully repair the Charlotte Maxeke Hospital in Gauteng. The health department, that is, blames the delay partly on corruption. It suspended 9 senior officials for the delays at the hospital, and they're also implicated in corruption at the Anglo-Gold Ashanti Hospital in Carletonville. So let's discuss this matter now with Gauteng Government spokesperson Vuyo Mhaga. Vuyo, thank you so much for your time this morning. Let's talk a little bit about what's happening here when it comes to the repairing of the Charlotte Maxeke Academic Hospital. This is not the first time that the Gauteng province and the Department of Health has been implicated in any form of wrongdoing. We saw the PPE scandal that has come about, which has really placed a dark cloud over the Gauteng province. Now the Department of Infrastructure Development as well as Health have got senior officials that instead of actually focusing on fixing the hospital are choosing to pocket the profits. How do we resolve this? What's going on here?
Good morning, Faith, and to the viewers of eNCA. I think, Faith, let's do 2 things that are related but not necessarily the same. So you'll remember about a week or 2, we will have issued a statement. That statement was in relation to the Anglo-Gold Ashanti. After the SIU found that there was actually some wrongdoing there, and they recommended to the Gauteng government that we must suspend about 9 officials, 6 from TID and 3 from the Department of Health. And these 6 officials will obviously, one way or the other, be very central in the actual building of the infrastructure, because Department of Infrastructure is the one that is responsible. Now, fast forward then, that report will have come around December. There has been an impasse between the 2 departments about the scope of work and the budget thereof. As a result, things were really not moving. The Premier then had seconded the Director General, or instructed the Director General to make sure that he broker, some sort of an agreement so that work can actually continue at Charlotte. So when the SIU report kind of coincided with that ongoing conversation, then the Premier believed that either way, because if you're going to suspend the senior officials, it will actually have a direct impact in terms of finalizing and working on Charlotte Maxeke. And then that's when he actually signed a proclamation to give the powers away from DID to back to the Department of Health in consultation with the National Department of Health. That's how then the DBSA basically came into play.
But in that instance, again, it does not change the fact that when we're looking at anything, so far, COVID-19 was a problem, right, where we found PPE scandals and the undue awarding of contracts to even businesses and companies that were not even properly registered. Now we've got a building that is needed by the public, the South African public, for health matters. Then we see that there are still delays there, and some of those delays are correlated to how there's corruption within the system, where officials are trying to benefit from the vulnerability of its citizens. Then the question is, then what do we do to tighten measures against corrupt officials? Because something's going to happen within the province. Another issue is going to happen, because this is life. But when there's something that happens within the province, we should not find ourselves in a situation where time and time again, instead of fixing the problem, we have to focus on the corruption of officials.
You're quite correct, Faith. As you'll remember, some time back, Gauteng will have been the first province to develop the open tender system and really put the systems into play. Unfortunately, because of the nature of COVID, and that's when really some of the rogue elements within the system actually started to see some of the things, because you needed therefore to relax some of the measures in the benefit that some of the issues were actually of emergency. And that's where you'll actually see the PPE issue coming along, including this infrastructure. And I think the Premier will actually advance a discussion to say how best do we tighten up, and actually will make a report back in some of the work in terms of making sure that SCM officials are vetted, HODs are vetted. So it's going to basically come back to that. But we must go back to, in terms of tightening the measures as we have done pre-COVID, because really during the COVID, the whole issue that everything is in emergency. Therefore, the systems were really not followed at that time under that disguise that everything was an emergency. But we are going back to make sure that we are tightening up in terms of the measures pre to the COVID, and also further tightening up in terms of the personnel. So the people who are working around the SCM, the HR, as well as senior managers, all of them ought to go to vetting, and the Premier is going to actually report on that on Monday, how far we have gone as a province to make sure that we tighten up those systems.
Yeah, I mean, tightening up the systems is one thing. One would hope that in some way that these people get arrested, because if all we're doing is suspending them and then we're firing them, they don't pay for their sins, right? It's all the thing that they can do is that they can move from there and then jump to another area where they can actually perpetuate the very same corruption. 2023 has been earmarked for the time that this completion of the Charlotte Maxeke reparations are supposed to actually happen. So in that instance then, how significant is this delay to those that need to be benefiting from the hospital itself?
Well, the delay has been significant. You'll appreciate that Charlotte is one of the eminent hospitals, very sophisticated. It runs very sophisticated medical operations there. But there has been an opening, so some sections of Charlotte will have been opened, and I think end of next month, another emergency section will be open. So we are actually obviously opening that, and we are quite happy with the plans of the DBSA, because the initial plan was that that hospital will have been open in 2027. The initial or preliminary view of the project manager believed that that thing will actually be done by end of next year. So we're actually quite happy with that. But we understand because this hospital is not operating at its full capacity, and that is hampering the whole health system within Gauteng province.
68 million rand has already been raised for the purpose of refurbishing this hospital in itself, but more money is going to be needed to actually repair. The question is, where's the money going to come from? I mean, obviously, National Department of Health is going to be taking over, but it still needs to come from Gauteng province in some way or another. Do we have the budget for this? Do we have the budget to continue? Do we have the budget to ensure that the target of 2023 is actually met? Do we have the budget to ensure that those measures that you're speaking about, because unfortunately it is a cost to ensure that all those measures we've been speaking about around how mitigating against any more corruption within the system itself does not happen. Is there money?
Well, speaking to the colleagues from the National Department of Health, they don't see the issue of the money to be a major problem to respond to the challenge of Charlotte. They say there will be pockets and some grants that they will actually have access to. That kind of giving us a bit of a relief, because obviously, although Charlotte is really the major focus, there will be other hospitals that we still need to continue to make sure that we service in terms of across the province. So the maintenance budget will kind of be released to deal with other emergency issues or maintenance issues, whereas the National Department, in terms of the financial aspect, will obviously take a bit of a chunk to make sure that we resolve the Charlotte. So we're quite comfortable on that end, speaking to our colleagues at the National Department of Health.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Spokesperson for the Gauteng Premier, David Makura, there, Vuyo Mhaga, giving us the latest update in terms of what's happening there with the Charlotte Maxeke Academic Hospital. Another delay set to be completed by the end of 2023.